Don't touch that. You'll break it. Ethan Miller's hand froze inches from the keyboard, his cleaning rag still dripping onto the polished floor. Behind him, CEO Sophia Alcott stood in the doorway with her suited executives, her nose already wrinkling at the faint chemical smell clinging to his uniform. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Ethan said quietly, stepping back from the Phoenix terminal. "Just do your job and stay out of the way," Sophia replied, her voice carrying that particular tone reserved for service staff, the one that suggested he might contaminate the equipment just by breathing near it. She brushed past him like he was furniture, her heels clicking with authority he'd never possess. Her executives followed, not bothering to lower their voices. "Emergency board meeting in 20 minutes, she announced, each word sharp with barely controlled panic. "Project Phoenix better have good news, or we're looking at complete investor withdrawal." Ethan kept his head down, wheeling his cart toward the exit, invisible again, just like always. But something on the monitor caught his eye. The one she'd just warned him away from. Red warnings cascaded across multiple screens, error messages that sent recognition shooting through him as he spotted cascading system failures. Years of training kicked in automatically, reading the diagnostic patterns like muscle memory. Those error chains would propagate through the entire network architecture, taking down systems across the company. But as he wheeled away, the weight wasn't just the mop. It was years of being treated like he couldn't possibly understand the very technology he'd once designed. And from what he'd just seen, her precious Project Phoenix was about to collapse completely. Ever been invisible in a room full of people who think they're smarter than you? Sometimes the person everyone ignores knows exactly what's going wrong. Hit subscribe. This janitor's about to teach a CEO what real genius looks like. The Lincoln Elementary pickup line stretched like a parade of judgment. Ethan sat in his 10-year-old Honda, engine ticking as it cooled, watching BMW SUVs and Tesla Model X's idle with the quiet confidence of families who never counted grocery money twice. 3:30 sharp. He'd learned to time everything precisely. 15 minutes to get Lily, 20 minutes home, enough time for homework help before rushing back for the evening cleaning shift. Life had become a schedule optimized around other people's messes. Through his cracked windshield, he watched the usual cluster of parents near the school entrance. Designer handbags, phones pressed to ears, animated conversations about client acquisitions and market volatility. A woman in Lululemon gestured toward her Porsche while discussing her husband's startup exit strategy. These were people who spoke in millions like he counted quarters. When Lily appeared, dragging her backpack across the playground, she moved with the careful efficiency of a child who'd learned that transitions meant hurrying. Other kids ran to luxury cars where parents waited with organic snacks and scheduled activities. Lily walked to him with quiet dignity, her small shoulders carrying more awareness than any 8-year-old should. "Hi, Daddy." She climbed in, buckling her seatbelt without being asked. "Mrs. Chen asked if you could help with the computer fundraiser again. I told her you're busy." The sting hit familiar territory. He'd written networking protocols that half these parents used daily, had patents on distributed systems running in their companies. Now their children's teacher needed help installing basic educational software, and his daughter was protecting him from volunteering. "Maybe next time I could. It's okay." Lily's voice carried the protective wisdom of a child who'd learned to shield her father from situations that revealed their limitations. She found someone else. Their apartment felt like mission control for managing chronic illness. Medication schedules taped to the refrigerator, insurance forms stacked in careful piles, a glucose monitor charging next to homework supplies. Every surface organized around keeping an 8-year-old stable in a world that could bankrupt them with a single emergency room visit. Lily spread her math homework across the kitchen table, her movements economical and focused. Multiplication worksheets, fraction problems that twisted her face with concentration, normal third-grade struggles amplified by fatigue from medications that kept her autoimmune system from attacking itself. "Daddy, I don't understand this one." She pointed to a word problem about dividing pizza slices, her pencil worn down to a stub from multiple erasures. Ethan set down his instant coffee and leaned over her shoulder. The problem was simple enough, but she needed visual representation, the kind of interactive learning tools that cost more than their monthly food budget. Within minutes, he'd sketched a diagram that transformed confusion into understanding. geometric solutions that would have impressed graduate students. Lily's eyes brightened as the concept clicked, but then something else flickered across her face, that careful consideration he'd learned to recognize. "Daddy?" Her small fingers found the chain around his neck, the one that held his MIT class ring hidden beneath work shirts. "Why don't you work with computers anymore? This ring has the same symbols as the smart people on TV." The question hung between them like a debt neither could afford to pay. How do you explain to a child that love sometimes means choosing invisible sacrifice over visible success, that her medical needs had transformed his career from achievement to survival, making the flexibility of cleaning work the only option for a single father navigating specialist appointments and insurance battles? "Sometimes the most important work doesn't happen in offices," he said quietly. "Taking care of you, making sure you're healthy, that's the job that matters most." But Lily was 8, not stupid. She'd learned to read the emotional mathematics of their life, to understand that other families operated under different rules. "I know you gave up important things for me," she whispered, still fingering his ring. "When I grow up, I want to study computers too, and help people like you do." As Ethan looked at his daughter, brilliant, brave, carrying understanding that should have been years beyond her reach, he felt the familiar weight of loving someone more than your own dreams. She already saw the hero everyone else missed. The executive boardroom at TechCorp gleamed under recessed lighting, its mahogany table reflecting the glow from wall-mounted displays showing Project Phoenix's vital signs, all of them flatlined in various shades of red. Sophia Alcott stood at the head of the table like a general surveying a battlefield where every strategy had failed. "Gentlemen, we're hemorrhaging investor confidence by the hour," she announced, her voice carrying the particular edge that preceded executive bloodbaths. Around the table, her leadership team shifted uncomfortably in chairs that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Through the glass wall, Ethan pushed his cleaning cart past the conference room, timing his route to avoid disrupting whatever crisis management theater was unfolding inside. But voices carried, especially when panic made people forget about volume control. "The technical team keeps throwing around jargon," Sophia continued, gesturing toward charts that might as well have been abstract art. "Latency cascades, memory allocation failures, distributed processing bottlenecks. I need solutions, not computer science dissertations." Her chief technology officer, a nervous man named Bradley, who looked like he'd aged a decade in the past month, cleared his throat. "The architecture is fundamentally sound, Sophia. We just need more time to—" "Time?" Sophia's laugh carried no humor. "We have investors pulling 8-figure commitments because our flagship product crashes every 6 hours. Time is the one thing we don't have." Ethan slowed his cart, pretending to organize cleaning supplies while his mind automatically processed the technical fragments drifting through expensive air. Memory allocation failures in distributed systems, classic symptoms of improper thread management in multi-core environments. The kind of elegant mistake that happened when brilliant people built complex solutions without understanding foundational architecture. "Maybe we need fresh perspective," suggested Richard Sterling, the CFO, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Someone who can see what we're missing." Sophia turned toward the window, her reflection overlaid against the city skyline like a ghost haunting her own success. "Fresh perspective? From where? We're already paying the best talent in Silicon Valley." That's when her eyes landed on Ethan, visible through the glass as he methodically emptied wastebaskets with the systematic efficiency she wished her technical team possessed. A moment of inspiration crossed her face, the dangerous kind that came from desperation. "You know what our problem is?" She gestured toward Ethan like he was a prop in her presentation. "We've forgotten that some people know their place in the world. That janitor out there? He shows up, does his job, stays in his lane, no ego, no excuses, no pretensions about being something he's not." The room fell silent except for the hum of climate control and the distant sound of Ethan's cartwheels on polished marble. Her executives followed her gaze, some nodding with the uncomfortable agreement of people watching their boss use a stranger as a teaching tool. "Maybe that's what we need more of around here," Sophia continued, her voice gaining momentum. "People who understand their limitations instead of pretending expertise they don't possess." But what she didn't see, what none of them could see, was the way Ethan's hands had gone still on his cleaning supplies, the way his jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly as her words registered. Years of being invisible had taught him to absorb insults like background noise, but something about being used as an example of knowing your place hit different. Because the man she was dismissing as a cautionary tale about staying in your lane had designed distributed computing systems before she'd graduated business school. Security guard Michael Rodriguez found Ethan in the server room an hour later, meticulously cleaning around equipment most people weren't allowed to breathe near. The older man had been working TechCorp's night shift for 3 years, long enough to recognize when someone was working with unusual focus. "Rough night?" Michael asked, settling into his rounds with the comfortable rhythm of a man who'd learned to read the building's moods. Ethan looked up from wiping down server rack 47C, his movements careful and precise around blinking lights that represented millions in corporate investment. "Just thorough." But Michael had sharp eyes, sharpened by 20 years of military service before transitioning to private security. He'd noticed things. The way Ethan's cleaning patterns coincided with times when sensitive equipment displayed error messages, how he seemed to understand the technical conversations drifting from conference rooms better than most engineers. "You know," Michael said casually, "I've seen a lot of janitors in my time. Most of them clean around computers like they're radioactive. You clean them like you understand what they do." Ethan's hand paused on his cleaning cloth. In the blue glow of server status lights, the two men studied each other. One trained to notice details others missed, the other trained to remain unnoticed despite possessing details others needed. "Just being careful," Ethan replied. "Expensive equipment." "Expensive equipment that's been throwing fits for weeks," Michael observed. "Kind of funny how the cleaning crew knows more about system stability than the guys in suits." The comment hung between them like a test. Ethan had spent years perfecting invisibility, but something in Michael's tone suggested understanding rather than suspicion. Still, revealing knowledge came with risks he couldn't afford, not with Lily's medical bills and his precarious employment status. "I just listen," Ethan said finally. "Hard not to overhear things when you're always in the background." Michael nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Listening's a useful skill. So's knowing when to speak up." As the security guard continued his rounds, Ethan remained alone among the humming servers, surrounded by technology that sang with problems only he seemed capable of diagnosing. But speaking up meant revealing himself, and revelation meant risking the only job that allowed him to be the father Lily needed. One wrong move, and he'd lose the only stability keeping his daughter's world intact. The emergency board meeting convened at 7 a.m. sharp, with Sophia Alcott standing before a room of stone-faced investors whose collective net worth could buy small countries. The Phoenix status display dominated the wall behind her, a cascade of red warnings that looked like a digital hemorrhage. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're facing a temporary setback," Sophia began, her voice carrying the forced confidence of someone trying to convince herself as much as her audience. But temporary setbacks didn't crash servers every 4 hours or send error reports to every major tech journalist in Silicon Valley. Richard Sterling, her CFO, sat at her right hand like a concerned advisor, his expression perfectly calibrated between supportive and grave. What the room couldn't see was the slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, the expression of a man watching pieces fall exactly where he'd placed them. "The technical issues are complex but manageable," Sterling interjected smoothly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent years perfecting the art of financial manipulation. "However, I believe we need more aggressive restructuring to weather this crisis." Translation: "Give me more control while Sophia takes the blame." "What kind of restructuring?" asked Margaret Chen, lead investor, her pen poised over a notepad that would determine whether TechCorp survived the week. Sterling had prepared for this moment with the patience of a chess master. Emergency powers for financial oversight, streamlined decision-making, the ability to make hard choices without emotional interference. Sophia felt the trap closing but couldn't see its dimensions. Sterling's proposal sounded reasonable. Crisis management required decisive action. But what she didn't understand was that every solution he offered would complete the systematic destruction he'd been orchestrating for months. "I'm prepared to take whatever steps necessary," she said, signing documents that felt like signing her own execution warrant. But as ink dried on papers that handed Sterling exactly the authority he needed, one investor asked the question that would haunt her. How confident are we that this is a technical problem rather than a fundamental design flaw? Sterling's answer came too quickly, too smoothly. Completely confident. Sometimes systems just need better management. Ethan was cleaning executive workstations when he found it, a deleted email in Richard Sterling's trash folder that hadn't been properly purged from the server backup system. Most janitors would have ignored the digital detritus, but Ethan's eye caught familiar patterns in the partially recovered text. Payment authorization to Meridian Systems, $2.3 million for architectural consulting. But Ethan knew Meridian, a shell company that existed only on paper, the kind of financial phantom that sophisticated embezzlers used to launder money through legitimate-looking contracts. He'd seen similar structures during his MIT days, case studies in corporate fraud that seemed academic until you found them hiding in real systems. His fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory, recovering fragments of deleted correspondence that painted a picture of systematic sabotage. Sterling hadn't just been stealing. He'd been deliberately corrupting Phoenix's architecture through his contractor relationships, ensuring failure while positioning himself as the solution. Find something interesting? Ethan's blood turned to ice. Sterling stood in the doorway, his expensive suit making him look like death in Armani. The CFO's eyes held the particular coldness of someone who'd just realized their carefully constructed plan had a witness. "I'm sorry, sir. Just emptying the trash." "I'm sure you are." Sterling stepped into the office, closing the door behind him with the quiet finality of a coffin lid. "You know, Ethan, I've been watching you. You're very thorough, very observant." The use of his name sent alarm bells screaming through Ethan's nervous system. Invisible people didn't have names. They had job descriptions and dismissive gestures. When someone like Sterling learned your name, it meant you'd become a problem that needed solving. "I just clean, sir." "Of course you do." Sterling's smile held all the warmth of a shark's grin. "But cleaning means seeing things, doesn't it? Things that might confuse someone who doesn't understand the complexities of corporate finance." "The thing about people in your position," Sterling continued, settling into his leather chair like a judge delivering sentence, "is that you depend on goodwill, employment at will, no union protection, no job security beyond our generosity." Ethan's phone, tucked in his uniform pocket, was recording, a habit he'd developed after too many encounters with aggressive executives who thought cleaning staff couldn't defend themselves. But Sterling was too arrogant to consider that the janitor might be documenting his threats. "I have a daughter," Ethan said quietly, playing the role of desperate father that Sterling expected to see. "I know about Lily." The casual mention of his daughter's name hit like a physical blow. "Autoimmune condition, expensive medications, specialist appointments that require flexible scheduling." Sterling leaned forward, his voice dropping to the intimate tone of someone sharing secrets. "It would be unfortunate if circumstances forced you to seek employment elsewhere. Companies can be very reluctant to hire janitors with complicated personal situations." But Sterling's arrogance had made him sloppy. In his confidence that he was intimidating an ignorant maintenance worker, he'd begun explaining his scheme. The contractor payments, the deliberate sabotage, the financial restructuring that would let him complete Phoenix's destruction while positioning himself as TechCorp's savior. "You see, Ethan, sometimes systems need to fail before they can be properly managed. Phoenix was always too ambitious, too expensive. Better to let it collapse naturally and rebuild with more reasonable expectations." Ethan kept his expression blank. His shoulders slumped in apparent defeat, while his phone captured every word of Sterling's confession. The CFO was essentially admitting to corporate espionage, embezzlement, and conspiracy, enough evidence to send him to federal prison for decades. "I understand, sir," Ethan said, his voice carrying the defeated tone of a man who knew his place. But what Sterling couldn't see was the MIT-trained mind behind those downcast eyes, cataloging every detail of the financial conspiracy while recording a confession that would destroy him. Sterling had just admitted to corporate espionage to a software engineer with a perfect memory for systems architecture. The server room hummed with electronic life at 2 a.m., its blue-lit corridors empty, except for Ethan and the machines that never slept. He'd waited until the building settled into its nocturnal rhythm, when only security cameras and backup systems witnessed his transformation from janitor to engineer. His fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced precision, accessing system logs that most TechCorp employees didn't know existed. Years of cleaning around these servers had given him intimate knowledge of their physical layout, but his MIT training let him navigate their digital architecture like a familiar neighborhood. Sterling's financial trail snaked through the system like a virus, hidden in seemingly legitimate contractor payments and budget allocations. But Ethan could see the pattern. $2.3 million to Meridian Systems for architectural consulting that had actually introduced critical vulnerabilities into Phoenix's core framework. The beauty of Sterling's scheme was its sophistication. He'd used real contractors to implement flawed designs, creating plausible deniability while ensuring systematic failure. Each payment corresponded to a degradation in system performance, a timeline of deliberate sabotage disguised as legitimate consulting. Ethan's screen filled with evidence that would make federal prosecutors salivate. Bank routing numbers, authorization codes, email chains between Sterling and shell companies that existed only to launder embezzled funds. But the real smoking gun was the technical correlation. Every payment matched a specific introduction of architectural flaws that would guarantee Phoenix's collapse. His phone, still carrying Sterling's recorded confession, represented the confession. These system logs represented the financial proof. Together they formed a prosecutorial package that would destroy Sterling's life as thoroughly as Sterling had tried to destroy TechCorp. But compiling evidence meant nothing without the courage to use it. And courage, for a single father with a medically fragile daughter, was a luxury he'd learned to ration carefully. The data was damning enough to send Sterling to federal prison for decades. Lily was supposed to be asleep when Ethan arrived home at 3 a.m., but he found her in the living room, surrounded by his old MIT textbooks and course materials she'd discovered while looking for bedtime stories. Advanced computer architecture, distributed systems design, network security protocols. "Daddy?" She looked up with the solemn expression of a child who'd just discovered that her father was harboring secrets. "These books have your name in them, and there are certificates with gold seals." Ethan sat beside her on their second-hand couch, exhaustion warring with the need to explain years of sacrifice in terms an 8-year-old could understand. The textbooks fell open to pages dense with diagrams and equations, the mathematical poetry of systems he'd once designed. "I used to study these things," he said softly, "before you were born, before I learned what was really important. But you're still smart." Lily's small fingers traced the MIT seal on his diploma, which she'd found buried beneath insurance forms and medical records. "Smarter than the people at your work who treat you like you don't matter." The observation hit with devastating accuracy. His daughter, with the brutal honesty of childhood, had identified the central tragedy of his existence. Genius forced into invisibility by circumstances beyond his control. "Sometimes being smart isn't enough," Ethan explained. "Sometimes you have to choose between what you want to do and what you need to do." But Lily was studying his face with the intensity of someone learning to read emotional subtext. "You chose me. I chose you," he confirmed. "Every day. And I'd choose you again." She stood up with sudden determination, her 8-year-old frame carrying unexpected resolve. Walking to his closet, she pulled out his best button-down shirt, the one he saved for parent-teacher conferences and medical appointments, and laid it carefully on the bed. "Tomorrow you should wear your smart clothes," she announced, "and your ring where people can see it." In that moment, looking at his daughter who'd prepared his armor for a battle she couldn't fully understand, Ethan felt something shift inside his chest. Lily's faith wasn't just touching, it was empowering. She had decided to help Daddy be brave tomorrow. Dawn light filtered through their apartment windows as Ethan sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, staring at the evidence that could change everything. Sterling's confession played through earbuds while financial documents filled the screen, a digital arsenal capable of destroying a career criminal who'd hidden behind expensive suits and corporate respectability. But using it meant stepping out of the shadows he'd inhabited for years. It meant revealing himself as something other than the invisible maintenance worker everyone assumed him to be. It meant risking the only job that provided the schedule flexibility Lily's medical condition required. His daughter's drawing lay beside the laptop, a crayon masterpiece titled Daddy the Hero, showing a stick figure in a cape standing next to computers and helping people. She'd drawn it while he slept, her interpretation of the father she believed him to be beneath the uniform and humble circumstances. The weight of her faith was heavier than any technical challenge he'd ever faced. Ethan picked up his MIT class ring, feeling its familiar weight in his palm. For years, he'd worn it on a chain around his neck, hidden like a shameful secret. But this morning, as he slipped it onto his finger where it belonged, it felt like putting on armor. His phone buzzed with a text from Michael, the security guard. "Heard there's big meeting this morning. Board wants answers about Phoenix. You thinking of speaking up?" Ethan stared at the message, then at his daughter's drawing, then at the evidence that could save TechCorp and destroy Sterling. The three elements of his decision laid out like variables in an equation only he could solve. He typed back, "Tomorrow I stop being invisible." The board meeting was in 4 hours. Sterling's presentation, his final move to seize control while Phoenix burned, would begin at 9 a.m. sharp. Tomorrow he would stop being invisible. The boardroom filled with the scent of expensive coffee and existential dread as TechCorp's leadership gathered for what felt like a corporate funeral. Sophia Alcott stood at the head of the mahogany table, her usual confidence replaced by the brittle composure of someone watching their empire crumble in real time. "Before we begin Richard's presentation," she announced, her voice carrying the hollow authority of a general who'd already lost the war, "I want to address the Phoenix situation directly." Sterling sat poised with his laptop open, presentation slides loaded with carefully crafted lies designed to complete his takeover. His recovery plan would strip Sophia of operational control while positioning him as the company's financial savior, the final act in a performance that had been months in the making. The wall displays showed Phoenix's vital signs in unforgiving detail. System crashes every 93 minutes, data integrity failures cascading through core modules, investor confidence approaching absolute zero. It looked like terminal illness translated into corporate metrics. "Ma'am?" Ethan's voice cut through the boardroom tension with unexpected clarity. Every head turned toward the maintenance man standing in the doorway, no longer invisible, but suddenly, inexplicably present. He wore his best button-down shirt, and his MIT class ring caught the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Ethan continued, his voice carrying an authority that made the room's dynamics shift like tectonic plates. "But I need to address a critical technical issue with Project Phoenix." Sophia blinked, her brain struggling to process the janitor using vocabulary that belonged in graduate-level computer science courses. "Excuse me? The system failures you're experiencing aren't random," Ethan said, stepping into the boardroom with calm confidence. "They're the result of deliberate architectural sabotage designed to ensure Phoenix's collapse while creating opportunities for financial manipulation." Sterling's face had gone pale, but he maintained his composure with the desperate discipline of a poker player holding a losing hand. "Sophia, surely we don't need to." "Actually, Mr. Sterling, we do." Ethan's interruption carried the quiet authority of someone who'd spent years listening to corporate doublespeak. "Because I have evidence." The janitor just used vocabulary that made the MIT graduates look stupid. Ethan connected his laptop to the boardroom's presentation system with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. The first slide displayed his credentials: MIT Masters in Computer Science, 3 patents in Distributed Systems Architecture, author of networking protocols that half the companies in Silicon Valley used daily. "My name is Ethan Miller," he began, his voice steady as bedrock. "For the past 2 years, I've worked as maintenance staff while caring for my daughter's medical condition. But before that, I designed the distributed computing frameworks that power financial trading systems across Wall Street." The room sat in stunned silence as years of assumptions crumbled like badly written code. The invisible janitor they'd dismissed was revealing himself as one of the most qualified people in the building to diagnose Phoenix's problems. "The architectural failures plaguing Phoenix aren't accidental," Ethan continued, advancing to slides that displayed system logs with surgical precision. "They're the result of systematically introduced vulnerabilities implemented through fraudulent consulting contracts designed to create plausible deniability." His presentation moved through the evidence with devastating methodical precision. Financial transfers to shell companies, architectural changes that corresponded to performance degradation, a timeline that showed Phoenix's destruction was planned and executed over months of careful sabotage. Meridian Systems received $2.3 million for architectural consulting that actually introduced memory allocation flaws in the neural network processing layer, Ethan explained, his words carrying the weight of someone who understood both the technical and financial dimensions of the fraud. Every payment corresponds to a specific introduction of system vulnerabilities. Sterling realized his world was ending, but couldn't stop it. The evidence was overwhelming, presented with technical precision that left no room for doubt or misdirection. "These are serious accusations," Sterling managed, his voice carrying the desperate authority of someone trying to control a situation that had already escaped his grasp. "They're not accusations," Ethan replied calmly. "They're facts supported by digital evidence and recorded confessions." Sterling's last-ditch sabotage just became his signed confession. "This is ridiculous," Sterling protested, but sweat had begun to bead on his forehead, despite the boardroom's perfect climate control. "Are we really going to take technical advice from maintenance staff? You mean from the MIT-trained engineer who's been documenting your embezzlement for weeks?" Ethan's voice carried no anger, just the patient tone of someone explaining basic concepts to a slow student. He advanced to the next slide: bank routing numbers, authorization codes, email fragments recovered from deleted files. The digital paper trail of Sterling's scheme laid out with the precision of a surgeon's incision. Mr. Sterling has been using his CFO access to approve fraudulent consulting contracts with shell companies he controls, Ethan explained to the increasingly horrified board members. The technical failures he's been helping you manage are actually the result of sabotage he commissioned and paid for. Margaret Chen, the lead investor, leaned forward with the expression of someone watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. "You're saying our CFO deliberately destroyed our flagship product?" While positioning himself as the solution, Ethan confirmed, "Yesterday evening, Mr. Sterling threatened my employment and my daughter's welfare to ensure my silence about what I'd discovered." He clicked to the final slide, an audio waveform representing Sterling's recorded confession. "Fortunately, I was recording our conversation." The playback filled the boardroom with Sterling's voice, arrogant and threatening, explaining his scheme with the casual confidence of someone who thought he was intimidating an ignorant janitor. Every word was clear, incriminating, and legally devastating. "Sometimes systems need to fail before they can be properly managed," Sterling's recorded voice explained to the horrified board. "Phoenix was always too ambitious. Better to let it collapse and rebuild with more reasonable expectations." As his own words condemned him, Sterling made one final desperate attempt at damage control. His fingers flew across his laptop keyboard, trying to delete critical files from TechCorp's financial servers. But Ethan had anticipated this moment. "Mr. Sterling, you should probably stop trying to delete those files," Ethan said calmly. "I've already backed up everything to multiple secure locations. Your deletion attempts are just creating additional evidence of obstruction of justice." Sterling's frantic typing ceased as federal sirens grew audible in the distance. FBI agents responding to the corporate fraud report Ethan had filed that morning. Sterling's final sabotage had just become his signed confession. The boardroom fell silent except for the distant sound of federal agents entering TechCorp's lobby, their footsteps echoing through marble corridors like a countdown to justice. Sophia Alcott sat motionless, her world reorganizing itself around the revelation that the janitor she'd dismissed as furniture was the most qualified person in the building. "I owe you an apology," she said finally, her voice stripped of the corporate armor she'd worn for years, "and an explanation for how badly I misjudged everything." Ethan remained standing, his presentation still glowing on the wall display, evidence that had just destroyed one career while potentially saving hundreds of others. But his expression carried no triumph, just the quiet dignity of someone who'd done what needed doing. "The position of Chief Technology Officer is yours," Sophia continued, her offer carrying the weight of genuine contrition. "Full executive compensation, stock options, complete authority over Phoenix's reconstruction. It's the least I can do to—" "No." The single word stopped her mid-sentence. Around the table, board members exchanged glances that questioned whether they'd heard correctly. In Silicon Valley, CTO positions at major tech companies weren't declined. They were career pinnacles worth millions in compensation. "I appreciate the offer," Ethan said carefully, "but I have different priorities." Sophia leaned forward, genuinely confused. "Different priorities?" "Ethan, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The salary alone would solve every financial concern you've mentioned." But Ethan's response would teach her something about value that business school had never covered. He pulled out his phone, showing a picture of Lily at her last medical appointment. 8 years old, brave as a soldier, smiling despite the IV line in her small arm. My daughter needs me available for specialist appointments, hospital stays, and medical emergencies that happen without warning," he explained. A CTO position would mean 60-hour weeks, constant travel, board meetings during school hours. I'd gain financial security, but lose the flexibility that lets me be the father she needs. The room absorbed this with varying degrees of comprehension. Some understood immediately, parents who'd made similar calculations between ambition and presence. Others struggled with the concept of someone choosing family time over executive compensation. "Then what do you want?" Sophia asked. Ethan's answer would revolutionize Silicon Valley work culture. "I want a consulting contract," Ethan said, his terms carrying the calm authority of someone who'd thought this through completely. "Project-based work that allows me to maintain my current schedule flexibility. I'll rebuild Phoenix's architecture, train your technical team, and establish security protocols to prevent future sabotage." His conditions were specific and non-negotiable. 25 hours per week maximum. No mandatory meetings during school hours. Remote work options for days when Lily needs medical care. And I want family-friendly policies extended to every technical employee who's currently sacrificing time with their children for artificial corporate expectations. Margaret Chen, the lead investor, nodded slowly as the implications became clear. "You're asking us to restructure our entire approach to work-life balance. I'm asking you to recognize that brilliant people often have complicated lives," Ethan replied. "Some of your best engineers probably have children, aging parents, or personal situations that require flexibility. Create space for that, and you'll retain talent that competitors lose to burnout." Sophia felt something fundamental shifting in her understanding of leadership and value. This man had just saved her company while teaching her that competence came in forms she'd never learned to recognize. "What about compensation?" she asked. "Market rate for the actual work performed. No equity, no golden handcuffs, no corporate politics, just honest payment for honest work, with the understanding that my daughter's medical appointments take priority over everything else." Around the table, board members absorbed a business lesson that wouldn't appear in any Harvard case study. The person who'd just saved their company was teaching them that sometimes the most valuable employees were the ones who refused to sacrifice everything for corporate success. His daughter's needs had just revolutionized Silicon Valley work culture. Michael Rodriguez found Ethan in the parking garage an hour later, loading his cleaning supplies into the Honda, while federal agents processed Sterling's office like a crime scene. The security guard approached with the measured pace of someone who'd watched powerful people fall before. "Hell of a morning," Michael observed, settling against a concrete pillar with the comfortable authority of someone who'd earned the right to speak freely. "Hell of a few years," Ethan replied, organizing equipment he'd used to maintain invisibility in a world that judged value by job titles and office locations. "You know, I had you figured for someone with background," Michael said. "Military teaches you to read people. You moved around computers like you understood them, talked like someone with education. But MIT?" He whistled low. "That's some serious credentials for a janitor." Ethan paused in his packing, considering how to explain years of deliberate underachievement. Sometimes life forces you into situations that don't match your qualifications. And sometimes those situations teach you things that qualifications never could, Michael replied. "You think any of those executives upstairs could have survived what you've been through? Single dad, sick kid, everyone treating you like you're invisible? Take strength they don't teach in business school." The observation carried weight that surprised Ethan. He'd spent so long thinking about what he'd given up, the prestigious career, the recognition, the financial security, that he'd stopped noticing what he'd gained: patience, humility, the ability to see systems from perspectives that privilege blinded others to. "Security works taught me a few things too," Michael continued, "like how the most dangerous people are often the ones everyone trusts, and the most trustworthy people are usually the ones everyone overlooks." He extended his hand with the firm grip of mutual respect. "Thanks for speaking up. A lot of folks here were going to lose their jobs if Sterling's plan had worked." As they shook hands, Ethan realized that everything was about to change from the ground up. Not just Phoenix's architecture or TechCorp's policies, but the entire culture that had made genius invisible simply because it wore the wrong uniform. The entire company culture was about to change from the ground up. Lily was waiting on the apartment steps when Ethan arrived home that afternoon, her small frame practically vibrating with excitement, despite the fatigue that always shadowed her autoimmune condition. She'd been tracking news alerts on their shared tablet, 8-year-old fingers surprisingly adept at navigating breaking stories about corporate fraud and unlikely heroes. "Daddy!" She launched herself into his arms with the enthusiasm of someone who'd watched her father transform from invisible to invincible in a single morning. "The news says you saved hundreds of jobs and caught a bad man stealing money." Ethan held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of children's shampoo and the faint antiseptic smell that clung to her from medical appointments. The weight of her small body against his chest reminded him why every sacrifice had been worth it. "I just did what needed doing," he said quietly. "No." Lily pulled back to look at him with the serious expression she wore when correcting adult misunderstandings. "You were brave and smart, and you helped people even when they were mean to you." She reached into her backpack and produced a new drawing, this one showing a stick figure in a button-down shirt standing next to computers, surrounded by other stick figures with happy faces. At the bottom, in careful second-grade handwriting, "Daddy the teacher." "Mrs. Chen called," Lily continued, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who'd been proven right about something important. "She wants you to help with the computer lab now. And Tommy's dad asked if you could teach him about networks because his company needs help too." The drawing showed remarkable insight for an 8-year-old. While adults had seen only a janitor stepping out of his lane, Lily had recognized her father's true nature, not a person who cleaned buildings, but someone who fixed broken systems and helped people understand complex problems. "You saw the hero in me before anyone else did," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion he rarely allowed himself to express. "Because I know you," Lily replied with the simple wisdom that only came from unconditional love. "You taught me math and reading, and how to be brave when doctors need to take blood. You're the smartest person I know, even when other people are too dumb to notice." Her casual dismissal of corporate executives as too dumb made Ethan laugh, the first genuine laughter he'd felt in months. That evening, as they worked on homework at the kitchen table, Lily asked the question that had been building behind her careful observations. "Daddy, why didn't you tell people you were smart before?" Ethan considered how to explain years of calculated invisibility to a child who'd grown up watching him choose humility over recognition. The medical bills spread across their counter told part of the story. Insurance forms and specialist co-pays that required the flexible scheduling only janitorial work provided. "Sometimes the most important job isn't the one that looks impressive," he said finally. "Taking care of you, making sure you have what you need for school and doctors and everything that matters. That was always my real job. The cleaning was just how I paid for it." "But you could have done both," Lily observed with the logic that made adult excuses sound foolish. "You could have been smart at work and taken care of me." The insight cut deep because it was accurate. Fear had kept him invisible as much as necessity. Fear of rejection, of professional failure, of risking the stability that kept Lily's world secure. He'd chosen the safety of low expectations over the risk of high stakes. "You're right," he admitted. "I was scared that if I tried to use my education, I might fail, and then we'd lose even the little security we had. It felt safer to be invisible." Lily nodded with the understanding of someone who'd learned to navigate complex emotions despite her young age. "But being invisible made you sad. I could tell." "Sometimes being sad is the price we pay for keeping people we love safe," Ethan explained. "But today you helped me remember that being brave is also part of keeping people safe." She beamed with pride, then grew thoughtful. "Daddy, I want to study computers like you did, but I want to help sick kids too. Can I do both?" Looking at his daughter, brilliant, compassionate, carrying dreams that honored both intellectual curiosity and service to others, Ethan felt something shift in his understanding of legacy and possibility. "You can do anything you set your mind to," he said, meaning it completely. "And when you're ready, I'll teach you everything I know about making systems work better for people who need them." As Lily returned to her homework, humming while she worked through math problems that no longer seemed impossible, Ethan realized that the next generation would build on his foundation in ways he'd never imagined. The next generation would build on his foundation. 6 months later, the Lincoln Elementary Computer Lab hummed with focused energy as Ethan guided a diverse group through basic programming concepts. The room had been transformed from outdated terminals to modern workstations. Funded by TechCorp's new community outreach program and staffed by volunteers who understood that teaching was another form of system design. "Remember," Ethan said, moving between workstations where former janitors, cafeteria workers, and security guards hunched over keyboards with the intense concentration of people discovering hidden talents. "Coding is just problem solving with very specific language. You already know how to solve problems. Now you're learning to explain solutions to computers." Maria, who cleaned offices downtown, raised her hand. "My daughter keeps asking me about websites. Could I learn enough to help her build one for her science project?" "Absolutely," Ethan replied, settling beside her workstation. "In fact, building websites is where a lot of people start. It's visual, immediate, and you can see your results right away." At a corner table, Lily worked with younger students on basic tablet navigation, her 8-year-old patients teaching 5-year-olds how to use educational apps. She wore a small badge that read Junior Teaching Assistant, a title she'd earned through her natural ability to explain complex concepts in simple terms. "Miss Lily," asked a kindergartner named Marcus, "how come your daddy teaches grown-ups about computers?" "Because grown-ups forgot they could learn new things," Lily replied with the matter-of-fact wisdom that had become her trademark. "Daddy reminds them that being smart isn't about your job. It's about wanting to understand how stuff works." Through the classroom windows, afternoon sunlight painted everything golden. Parents gathered in the hallway, some waiting to pick up children, others staying to audit lessons themselves. The artificial barriers between technical people and everyone else were dissolving as understanding spread through hands-on experience rather than academic intimidation. Michael Rodriguez, now head of TechCorp's new workforce development program, appeared in the doorway with his weekly progress report. 23 people enrolled in advanced courses this month, he announced, and 3 of our graduates just got hired by companies that never would have looked at their resumes 6 months ago. The success metrics told a story that traditional education had missed. Competence existed everywhere, waiting for opportunity and recognition. Former maintenance workers were building websites, security guards were troubleshooting network issues, and cafeteria staff were designing databases. The only difference was access to training that treated them as capable adults rather than charity cases. "We're building an army of underestimated heroes," Ethan said quietly, watching his students debug code with the same methodical precision they'd once applied to other forms of maintenance. He was building an army of underestimated heroes. As the day wound down and students packed their laptops, devices they now owned rather than borrowed, purchased through TechCorp's Equipment Scholarship Program, Ethan reflected on the strange mathematics of change. 6 months ago, he'd been invisible in a world that judged value by job titles and office locations. Today, his consulting work was reshaping how Silicon Valley thought about talent, potential, and the artificial barriers that kept brilliant people locked in limiting circumstances. The Phoenix Project had been rebuilt from the ground up, its new architecture designed by someone who understood both technical excellence and human resilience. More importantly, it had been implemented by a team that included former cleaning staff, security guards, and food service workers, people who brought perspectives that traditional hiring never would have considered. Lily skipped beside him toward the parking lot, her energy restored by an afternoon of teaching and learning. She still needed careful monitoring for her autoimmune condition, still required the flexible scheduling that his consulting arrangement provided, but her world had expanded beyond the narrow boundaries that medical bills and invisible fathers had once imposed. "Daddy," she said, tugging on his sleeve as they reached the car, "do you think other kids have parents who are secret geniuses too?" The question carried implications that reached far beyond their personal story. How many brilliant minds were hidden behind job titles that society had learned to dismiss? How many solutions to complex problems were walking around invisible, their potential locked away by circumstances, prejudice, and systems that confused credentials with capability? "I think there are amazing people everywhere," Ethan replied, helping her into the passenger seat. "People who understand things deeply, but never get the chance to show what they know. People who solve problems in ways that formal education never teaches. Like you did. Like a lot of people could, if someone just bothered to listen. As they drove home through familiar streets that no longer felt like a trap, Ethan thought about the ripple effects of recognition. TechCorp's new policies were being copied by other companies. His teaching program had requests from schools across the district. The story of the invisible janitor who'd saved a billion-dollar company had become a case study in business schools, though he suspected they were missing the point. The real lesson wasn't about hidden credentials or dramatic revelations. It was about the systematic blindness that let society waste human potential on an industrial scale. It was about the courage required to see clearly when everyone around you had learned not to look. But mostly, it was about the truth that his daughter had understood before anyone else. Competence wears many uniforms, speaks many languages, and often hides in plain sight among the people who keep the world running, while everyone else takes credit for the results. Somewhere tonight, another brilliant person was emptying trash cans in offices filled with people who'd never bothered to learn their name. Someone else was solving complex problems while being treated like invisible furniture. Another parent was choosing between recognition and responsibility, between ambition and love. What skills are you hiding that could change everything? Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone ignores. What skills are you hiding that could change everything? Share this story if you know what it feels like to be underestimated, because the world needs more people who remember that genius doesn't always wear a suit.